just to emphasize the importance of this very central practice of cultivating self-acceptance and identifying the energy centers that are most at work in daily life, coming from the unconscious dynamics and manifesting themselves in upsetting emotions. The emotions are really great friends. They tell us without fail what our value system really is. And so whenever that value system or belief system is challenged, they go off. And the fact that they speak to us by their afflictive nature at times tells us, clearer than anything else possibly could, that we have some work to do in letting go of the emotional programs for happiness again and again and again. Just to reinforce this, let me return to a few quotes here from Bill W., which describes his struggle with this situation. You remember that he was experiencing a depression from 1944 to 55, according to his letter. And so it was out of the midst of that depression that he has these following two quotes, which I'll now read. I am beginning to see that all my troubles have their root in a habitual and absolute dependence upon my personal prestige, security, and romantic attachment. Notice he says habitual and absolute dependence. It's not that some dependence isn't appropriate. It's the absolute, unlimited, unqualified, exaggerated nature of the programs in the unconscious for happiness, for security, power control, affection, esteem. That's the radical problem. It comes, of course, from not experiencing what true happiness is in early life. And so these are really desperate programs which have an enormous amount of energy and effect on our behavior. And so our behavior becomes habitually in the service of those programs until we confront it with the 12-step program or the spiritual journey in some other form. When these things go wrong, prestige, security, and romantic attachments, in his case, there is depression. So the feeling of depression is what told him that he was in trouble, and then he was able to recognize that his issues were prestige, dependence, and security. Now this absolute dependence upon people and situations for emotional security is, I think, the immense and devastating fallacy that makes us miserable. Notice this craving, not just a desire, this craving for such dependencies, this utter dependence upon people and situations can only lead to conflict. Exclamation point. There's no chance of not having conflict with that kind of demand on reality. Reality doesn't work that way. And also we're in competition with 5.5 billion other egos pursuing the same stupid journey. But innocently, I mean, they're not even aware of it most of the time. So it's an enormous gift just to be aware that of what the problem is and where it lies. This craving for such dependencies, this utter dependence upon people and situations, can only lead to conflict, both on the surface and at the depth. We might interpret that as both on the conscious level and the unconscious level. We are making demands, here it goes again, demands, needs, shoulds. Those are the signal, the feeling of have to be happy. sure sign of emotional and exaggerated attachment. We are making demands on circumstances and people that are bound to fail us. The only safe and sure channel of absolute dependence is upon God himself. So he's got the solution. Now, how to get from exaggerated dependence to the solution. Genuine, healthy dependence on God, not a codependency on God in which we try to manipulate God to our way of thinking, but a real dependence on God in the sense of doing his will as the way to true happiness, freedom, and love. Then there's a commentary by the author of this book. Bill came to see that facing his dependency issues meant being free from depression. He wrote in 1953, the central curative idea was that I didn't have to be dependent in any absolute sense upon any particular person, groups of persons, or set of circumstances, to be a whole person, a going human concern. Please notice that he shifts the focus from his emotional programs to happiness, demanding prestige or approval and security, to over-identification with group. Now he speaks of his dependency on particular persons and groups, and he sees that that has to be let go of also. I realized that the basic defect of my life had been a craving to depend absolutely upon the instinctual rewards of a place in society, material and emotional security, also the right romance. Consciously and unconsciously, I had always demanded these things as a condition of happiness. The only absolute that we can depend on is God's love. God alone is infinite, absolute. That means nothing else can bring us happiness. That's the way it is. And finally, he continues with a final paragraph about his deliverance. Then, when I became willing to let go of demands and substitute for them an ongoing love as best I could show it, just as one would in a 12-step case, to that extent I became liberated, and to that extent did I receive the gifts of proper instinctual satisfaction. This is what I have been pondering most of late. And when I realized it and felt the truth of it and became more willing to practice love in this manner, my depression came to an abrupt end. The skies cleared for me as never before. Well, I'm not saying anything else, so you don't really need my contribution, such as it is. But it's interesting to note that the centering prayer practice and its practices for daily life, from a wholly different place, has come to the same conclusion. And so that kind of reinforces us both. And believe me, the 12 steps of AA have reinforced, my own insights into the centering prayer practice and the Christian mystical tradition, which really is, in its best form, is saying the same thing, but needs to be enriched by the doctrine of the unconscious level of our personalities that hasn't been too clear in preceding centuries. Now, obviously, in trying to find a practice for daily life that best suits you, there's more than one that you could look at. I've mentioned what I considered most important: cultivating a full self-acceptance, and again, dismantling the emotional programs for happiness. A third one, obviously, is disengaging from what we obviously see as an over-dependence on people, groups, and so on. And the over-dependence manifests itself when we feel when we feel that our identity is dependent on belonging to a group. It's a sure sign we're over-dependent. And also, it's a hint that we have to be prepared for the de-rolling process that life provides. That is, we spend so much of our early adolescence and the early 20s providing for the future, developing a business or a profession or a skill, to earn money, to have a family, to get the children through school, maybe even through college, to get insurance, to get a reasonable security for the future, and to live in a decent neighborhood and all those things. This is an inevitable process that we all go through. At the same time, after midlife, things start going downhill. One's physical prowess diminishes. If you're a great athlete, you have to retire from the Broncos or the golf or whatever is your sport. It's a period in when many people get a divorce after 20 years. Doesn't seem to be working. Why it's not working is another question. Usually it's the fault of the other spouse or something. And so time to try a new partner. And of course, what happens is you bring all the problems you had with the first one, because really they weren't entirely the fault of the other party. So now marriage isn't what you hoped it would be, and your physical powers are diminishing, and now you are in competition for other people in the business you're in, gets close to retirement, and so this de-rolling process, the children grow up and leave home, they don't need you anymore. So what's left of you if you identified yourself with a role? Nothing. If that's all that you thought you were. And so the best way to fulfill a role, especially a service or ministry, especially the great ministry of parenting, probably the greatest vocation in the world, because if parents don't do their job well, children will spend their lives recovering from childhood. This is the meaning of a lot of Jesus' apparently exaggerated remarks, where he says, unless we hate our family and our children and spouse, you can't be my disciple. Again, he's a wisdom teacher, and wisdom teaching is not like other teaching. It's always exaggerated, because it's trying to get your attention. When you're speaking and you want to call somebody's attention to what you're going to say, you shout, hey. But when you're writing, you exaggerate. And in this way, you hope to, the shock value will grasp people's attention. What Jesus is saying, you have to be free of the domination of the value systems, or what you selfishly get out of your role model. And if you really want to fulfill a role, you have to be willing not to be in that role. And then you're ready to fulfill it perfectly. So to be anything, you have to be willing to be nothing first. So from the perspective then, from what I've been just saying, it's clear how subtle and how deep-rooted is the false self-system and the emotional programs for happiness, because they go off in areas that seem to be good or holy or even sacred. And there's still, the self gets into that, and how to eradicate that is really beyond our power. We can only do what we can to remain in the presence of the divine therapist, the presence of God, and to relate everything we're doing to God in order to discern what to do next, the next step. And it's I venture to say, the process itself that teaches you, not any particular method. But you do need some methods to sort of prove your goodwill and to try and to keep your focus on the process of the liberating process that we've been speaking about in regard to the human condition.